Welcome to Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things, the podcast show. I'm your host, Carrie Roberts, and I have with me today yet another extraordinary person and guest, Mr. Ralph Graves Jr., who is also from New Jersey, which makes me very excited. So welcome, Ralph. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Carrie. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, fellow Jerseyan. Thank you for having me.
When I saw that, I was like, oh, yes, there's something about New Jersey people. I'm like, I don't know. We get each other. There's like a bond of some capacity. So I love that you're here.
Oh, yeah.
So you were a police officer for almost 20 years. But before we kind of get into that, I want to start way before that, talk a little bit about where you grew up. And I'm curious what your experience was with police officers as a young man and what made you want to become one later on.
I grew up in a town called Deptford, New Jersey. It's little town, probably about 25 minutes from Philadelphia. But it was known for pig farming and just, it is what it is. We were special when we got a mall, Deptford Mall. Very multiracial, multicultural. I was born in 68, so I had my formative years in the 70s and 80s, and we were just kids, man. I had kids of friends of all colors. I mean, it was just, we didn't think, the big thing in Deptford, we were a big football town. Everybody played football. We won a lot of state championships. So yeah, it was, I just grew up in a town like that, little, small town America in the 80s where we listened to every kind of music from Run DMC to Motley Crue. So from rap to rock to everything in between. Yes. So that's what my childhood was like. And my interaction with police officers were always great. I mean, guys would pull over the car and have catch with us playing football on the street. I remember that. Somebody's dad was always a police officer. So nobody bothered our group of kids because that's so-and-so's dad, that's so-and-so's kid, So, but no, our interaction was always positive. And we did knuckleheaded things like most kids from Jersey do. We riding dirt bikes places we weren't supposed to ride, but, nothing, we were very mischievous, but nothing crazy. But my interaction with police were always positive. And here's the funny thing. I never wanted to be a police officer. That's not how I'd never dreamed of it. I wanted to go into corporate law. But my high school sweetheart, who's now my wife, she didn't get pregnant. I got her pregnant. I hate saying she got pregnant. Like, often got
Two
pregnant.
People, yeah.
I was involved in her pregnancy.
I love that.
I was in college, and you come home for a weekend, and boom, she was still senior in high school, and so I went off to the service for a little while, and then I came back, and I needed a job, and they were hiring. My record was clean. I never had a speeding ticket, so I applied, and there you have it. 20 years later, I retired. And I think, and I'm going to probably jump in the gun, I think we make the best police officers, guys that never intended being a police officer, women that never intended, where we just needed a job and, hey, we're out here doing it. I made the rank of sergeant. I was decorated. And it was always the people that were always super excited about, I want to be a cop my whole life. We were kind of afraid of hiring those people,
Why is that? That's interesting, because I feel like sometimes when you think of just jobs in general and somebody does something that they're like, it's just a job, like it could go either way. Either they hate and they leave, or they really find a passion for it. What do you think was different about that?
Well, when I heard especially a guy say, well, always wanted to be a police officer, and it's mostly because he wanted to, you always want to be an authority figure. Always wanted to, yes. I don't want to say boss people around, but a lot of times they become that way. They always wanted to be authoritative. I've always dreamed of it. Not because you really want to make a difference or help people or better someone's life or better your community or pull somebody up. You just want to write everybody tickets that you were pissed off with before you became a police officer.
That is true. I feel like I do hear that as well. And I had a female friend of mine that became a police officer when I lived down in Virginia. And one of the things that she said was, sometimes the police officers are unsung heroes. You talk
Yeah.
about firefighters or the
Right,
EMTs.
right.
And, she's like, people always think of police officers like, oh, speeding tickets, like you said, are not as good.
Yeah.
But she's like, we do a really great job. Did you
Yeah.
ever feel that? Or kind of where do you think kind of the police officer fits kind of within all of those different pieces?
Well, policing when I did it, I've been retired 11 years. So policing when I did it and policing now is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
We were looked at as, I don't want to say heroes, but people respected us. I mean, I delivered babies in the back of cars. I don't say I delivered the baby. The baby just decided to come. I shout out to all of the labor and delivery nurses. My wife is one. I didn't deliver anything. The baby just decided to come, and I happened to be there. But no, I got a sense that people appreciated us. And I know neighborhoods did. I worked in one of the worst cities in the state of New Jersey, matter of fact, in the country, and so, but 90% of the residents were beautiful people. It's just that the other 10%, other 15% was some of the most violent people I ever interacted with. But, there's a game being played out in the street, and it's a cat and mouse game. And, you play it right, you play it correctly. Even the guy you're playing against has to have a respect for you.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because you were a police officer in Camden, New Jersey, and like you said, it's not considered one of the best areas. But it's interesting that you said, maybe 10 to 15% was not great people or things that could be dangerous or things that are happening.
Sure.
I'm curious. Like you said, you retired 11 years ago. We hear a lot, obviously, police officers, a lot of the things that we see on TV, we see what happened with George Floyd.
Yeah.
I've talked to a lot of Black men that say they have this talk when they're learning to drive, be very careful. Did you experience that, or how did you maybe make a different impact in your community knowing things like that, even though, it's not recent, but back then?
Well, growing up, I didn't experience because my father did have that talk with us. I mean, yes, a Black male in America, you better have that talk. You better have that talk. I mean, even today, retired, I'm going to be honest with you. And living in the community I live in, I retired 11 years ago. So most of the people I work with, most people that remember who I was and what I did, they also have retired. So we got a whole new crop of officers on the street. So like today, I went out for my 3-mile walk. I make sure that I don't dress like a suspect. There's a certain anxiety sometimes being a Black man in your own community, But I had to have that talk with my kids. My father had that talk with me. On the job, I went through when our graduating class might have been 40 police officers and two were Black. So you see what goes on,
Yeah.
Every class you might get 2 or 3 people of color, and so and women too. I didn't even have any women in that class. 0 women in my graduating class. And so when we go out in the communities, we talk to them. I make sure I talk to all the kids, but I made sure, especially with dealing with the inner city kids, I would get out because that white police officer back in Deptford, back in Winona, got out and played catch with me. I remember how that felt. I would get out my patrol car and I would throw the ball around. I would play steady quarterback for both sides for about 10 minutes. That's community policing. And, I talk to the youth. I even, if I was arresting someone, I never arrested them, especially a man, Black, white, and different. I never arrested them in front of their family. I would say, listen, we're going to go to the back of the car. I'm not going to cuff you in front of your children. I'm not going to do that. So let's just act like we're taking a ride, and I would cuff them discreetly, put them in the back of the car. So there are ways to police correctly. And that wasn't a class that I took. That was listening to the OGs, the older police officers that took me under their wing, taught me how to treat people in neighborhoods and people in the city, and taught us how to what the police should be an asset. Yeah, we fight crime. Yeah, we're matter of fact, my squad was called the Regulators. We did all of that, but we treated people with respect, and that wasn't in the classroom. Some older officers taught me that.
Yeah. And I'm so much about that, obviously, as having been part of this show. And it sometimes seems like common sense.
Yeah.
But it at the same time, it is something that maybe does need to be taught, because we learn it somewhere, like you said, whether it's from
Yeah.
parents or people growing up, and how
Yeah.
important that is. Now, going into, again, you worked in Camden, which can be,
Mhm.
as you mentioned, a pretty dangerous
I
area.
also worked in Newark and Piscataway.
Oh,
So
so all the areas.
yeah.
So when you did that, I mean, and you're talking about, okay, I have to be kind, I have to be, think about community policing, but then you also, on the other hand, if somebody is dangerous, I mean, how do you kind of balance those two things? How do you make sure you can treat someone like a person, but also if somebody is obviously doing something wrong, really wrong, that you also can be an authoritative figure at the same time?
It's turning it on and off. Even during the arrest, I'm hired to. I was hired to uphold the law, not to bully people. You know what I mean. And I think you really have to keep that in mind. So I always believed in de-escalation. I always believed in that. Where was I in situations that escalated? Of course. Did I try to de-escalate at all times? Yes, I did. But sometimes they just escalated, and 9 times out of 10, that person may have had some mental issues, some other things going on. Might have been under the influence of whatever narcotic was in their system. There's certain things you can't help that.
Yeah.
But the normal everyday person, and you'd be surprised at who you run into when you're not working and they remember the arrest and you forgot. And they say, listen, you really could have embarrassed me that day, but you didn't. Respect. And they keep on walking. So.
Yeah. It's like, we just met and I already just love like your kindness and energy. And I think sometimes, we don't think police
Yeah.
officers can be that way.
Yeah.
Is there, when you were on the force, because I would imagine it's very stressful. Was there
Yeah.
anything you did at the time for your mental health or mindset? Did you meditate? Did you work out? Like, were there things that you did to make sure that you kind of kept that calmness when things got maybe a little bit crazy?
All the above. I'm a born again Christian. So of course my faith, jujitsu, Gracie jujitsu, I played flag football. I mean, I started young, so I to this day I'm still a gym rat. I did all those things. I boxed just to kind of keep me level. I coached football. I always wanted to pour into the youth coming up after me, and so I spent 25 years coaching football, even at the high school level. So that was fun. So it was those things. It was things like that. We rode motorcycles. We were guys. We were just men and women just trying to get home, just trying to make it home. And so it's, as far as the stress levels, exercise has always been a huge part of that. Exercise, some sort of activity, is always a huge part of that, just to kind of keep us level and kind of keep us moving in the right direction. So that was huge. I want to say this, Carrie, if I can.
Yeah.
I think the difference today, I'm going to tell you what happened with policing, and I can talk about it.
Yeah.
In New Jersey, we have something called 25 and out or 20 and out. I did 20. Some guys did 25. And there was a mass exodus. What happened? So if the mass exodus of mature, older leaders leave, nobody's left to instruct the ones coming in. And they have to figure it out. And so if anything, I regret, maybe we should have, I mean, my crew, everybody just ran out the door. But maybe we should have stayed and trained them a little bit more and whatnot, because I had phenomenal men that stayed almost 30 years when I got there. And I wouldn't have been able to do what I do without them training like that. And so, so it was a mess. So anytime the leaders leave, the alpha males, alpha females leave, you leave it to other people to figure out. They don't figure it out all the time.
Yeah, I think you're right. And like you said, things have changed so much. You think about, again, just social media. I mean, every moment somebody has the opportunity to videotape, to do something, to post it. And so in some ways, we all, not just police officers, everyone has to be on their quote unquote best behavior, because you just don't know what someone's going to take and post and all of those things. And so we see a lot of those changes.
I would have suspended over and over again because of the tomfoolery me and my crew used to do. So, not just because of some of the shenanigans we would do, not just to each other. Like, okay, who can get to Atlantic City and grab saltwater taffy before anybody notices? That kind of stuff,
I'm sure you have to keep it light. Like you said, when things are crazy, you're like, we need something that's just fun and lighthearted. Well, that's good to hear. So when you retired, was this in your mind to say, okay, I want to, like you said, you've been part of the church for a long time, but did you say, okay, I want to be continuing to be a leader in some capacity, and coaching and writing was the way, or like, was that really clear, or where did that come from?
I think that was always inside of me. And I never wasted time sitting in the police car. Like if I had to go on patrol, I was supervising the midnight shift, I always had a book. I always had a book. People probably got away with a whole lot of stuff because my head was in a book. I was always reading leadership books. I was always, reading personal growth books. And a friend of mine, I had about 10 years in, and actually I became a sergeant probably too early. I became a sergeant at 25. What did I know about leadership? And so I started at 21, I became a sergeant at 25. And so I started taking leadership classes with leadership guru at the time, John Maxwell, before he even got the JMT stuff. So I was with John a long time, and I really had to learn how to lead these men and women who some were older than I was, and so, I really got into it, and really leading that way, and then coaching people, and just really bringing out the best. I believe that everybody has a chance to live their life to their full potential in whatever capacity you're living in. And I've seen people carry with nothing, with 8th grade educations, become multimillionaires. And I said, how does this happen? How does this happen? It's because they figured some things out just by paying attention, that if you don't pay attention to these things will never happen in your life, And so that really stirred me up, and to really dive deeper into that. I always knew, as far as the church was concerned, I'm the son of a pastor. So I always knew growing up that I had the calling, and I never shared it with anybody until I got about 20, so I never knew I would pastor a church. I knew I would be a speaker, but I never knew I would pastor. But here we are today,
Well, like I said, it seems to have been in you for a long time. So I always think everything kind of connects itself. We don't notice until we look back, but you see those connections little by little. So you've written a few books, you have a podcast, and our topic today is kind of talking about, you kind of have these like 7 success kind of principles that you learned having been a police officer. Are these things that you learned like from yourself, or is this what you learned from other people?
7 universal laws. It's things that I've seen, things I've learned from myself, things I've put into practice, sitting down and talking to other people. There are hundreds of universal laws, thousands probably. And like when I talk about universal laws, people say, oh, he's talking about universal. No, gravity is a universal law. All right. As long as you obey it, you're going to be fine. You disrespect gravity, you in trouble. It's a universal law. And so there are, I told people, I said, listen, if a Christian, a Muslim, whatever, non-Christian, whatever, if they're on a building and they jump off, the Christian ain't going to grow wings. He disrespected gravity like everybody else, So these are universal laws. And so that's right. I decided to write about 7 that were prominent, and that I've seen in my life, 7 of medium complexity. I talk about, I call me, these 7 that anybody can really obey them, and just obeying these can actually turn your life around. It really can.
So let's talk about maybe the 3 of the 7. What would be one that you would share first?
Probably the law of habit first. First, I would share the law of habit. I mean, that's one of my favorite ones, because listen, you don't have to, people say, it takes 21 days, or some people refute that. But again, we're talking about things of medium complexity. All right. So if I develop a habit, if I go at it, say I need to develop the habit of saving, the habit of studying, the habit of getting to bed earlier. It's one thing to develop a good habit, but here's the key, or one thing to get rid of a bad habit, but we have to replace it with a good one. And what I talk about in the book is, if you're throwing out an old recliner in your house or wherever you are, right? Or you put it in the garage. You take the old recliner and put it in the garage because it's an old habit. And you have a space that's wide open. If you don't hurry up and purchase a new one, you're going to bring that old one right back into the house. And so I can take away this bad habit. I can say, I'm not going to buy tasty cake crimpets every day, butterscotch crimpets every day. All right. That's just one of the habits I got to stop. I can say I'm not going to do that, but then I'm going to have to replace it, because if I don't replace it, I'm going to be right back at Wawa. Wawa's a store here in New Jersey.
Yes.
I'm right back at Wawa buying a tasty cake. And tasty cake, I think, is also regional to Philadelphia and South Jersey. I'll be buying tasty cakes. And I'll be eating these, but I have to replace it. And so that's really the law of habit. And we have to understand that we form our habits, and then after a while, our habits form us. Our habits form us. And so the law of habit is probably the first one that I love all 7. Then the next one that I really like is the law of reciprocity. I think that might be my favorite. And the law of reciprocity simply says, whatever I put out is coming back, no matter what it is. Whatever I put out in the universe, whatever I put out there is coming back. It may not show up immediately, but it's coming back, just like a seed that is sown. Matter of fact, it'll come back more than what I put out. So if I'm putting love out, I'm going to get a lot of love. If I'm putting kindness out, if I'm a giver, I'm a big tipper. I think tipping is huge. Matter of fact, me and my friends, we go out and we argue who's going to leave the tip, because we know that there's a blessing associated with that tip. We just like blessing people, but we're like, oh man, don't mess up my blessing. It's my turn to tip. And so it's but that's probably a favorite law of mine. Is the law of reciprocity. The Bible says this, and I'm not getting preachy, but it's simply a fact. If I put crumbs in the water, right, cast my crumbs on the water, they'll float out. But when they come back, they're swollen, almost like a loaf. That's you cast a piece of bread in the water. When it comes back, it swells. And so whatever we put back, when it comes back, it swells for us. And so the law of reciprocity is big for me. I've seen that practiced in these people's lives that I talk about in the book. And the most important universal law is the law of forgiveness. That's the most important, and probably the hardest for a lot of people to grasp, is the law of forgiveness. I think we misunderstand it. I think forgiveness, we like to, we're letting people off the hook. I'm not letting you off the hook. I'm letting me off the hook. Bitterness, it's been proven. Bitterness, eventually causes all kinds of things to happen in my physical body. Forgiving you is not saying that it's okay what you did. It's just that it doesn't control me anymore. Forgiving you doesn't mean that we have to remain in the relationship. I can forgive you and say adios, say goodbye. You go your way and I go mine. But this thing of forgiveness, we have to be careful, Carrie, not to be bitter, because that bitterness will eat us up on the inside. You can't really enjoy life if you're bitter. Have people screwed me over? Have people done me dirty? Have people done horrific things to me? Have I seen horrific things? I sure have. But I've had to let myself off of the hook. I couldn't carry it. So those are 3 that I like. And I like all 7, but those are 3 that are really huge for me. Probably the easiest 3 to kind of explain to people. But,
out of those 3, what would you say, the 3 you just gave, do you think are the most challenging for people, and why?
Forgiveness. There are people walking around mad at people from high school. I'm 53 years old. I forgot even that. And here's the funny thing. Most of the people that we don't forgive have no idea that we're walking around offended by them. Like they don't know, and they don't care. You know, and so that is so hard for people. You don't understand. They did this and they did that. I'm not saying they didn't. I'm saying that in order for you to grow, in order for you to heal, you have to accept that they did it, let it go, move on, forgive them. And here's another thing. People have a hard time forgiving themselves. Not only do we have a hard time forgiving other people, but that self-forgiveness is tough. I can't forgive myself for doing that. Well, you better. You better seek out. You better find out how to do it. You better, if you have to get therapy, get some therapy, whatever the case may be. I'm a big therapy. I believe in it, you know, but you're holding yourself up. You're holding blessings up. You're holding yourself up from reaching your full potential by not forgiving. I think forgiveness is very tough. And sometimes we like holding grudges. Sometimes it's that grudge that fuels us to attempt to become successful. I'm going to prove everybody wrong. Okay, that works for a little while. But if you ain't doing it for yourself, that's like a match that burns bright for a second is going to burn out. Your why cannot be because I want to prove everybody wrong. That runs out. Because the people you're trying to prove wrong, most of them don't care, and then they might die. I mean, then what? What's your drive then? You know?
Yeah, I think you're right. What if, you've having been a police officer and been around people who have either done some pretty horrific things or seen it. Yeah. When somebody's been through someone that's a murder, someone that's been abused, all these really intense, horrible things. Do you have any suggestions of like steps they can take? Yes, I'm a huge component. I talk about in the show all the time of therapy, going to a therapist to work through things. But anything that either you found yourself or with other people that seems to kind of help if somebody's at that extreme level?
It's so bizarre, isn't it, to forgive somebody that maybe murdered someone you love or sexual assault, rape victim. And I'm talking about forgiveness and people like Graves. How can I ever forgive them? And again, I have to forgive them because it has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with my healing. If I love myself, for me, being a Christian, I needed God's help to forgive some of the things I've seen, to forgive some of the things that, Lord, listen, I want to, but I say I forgive him, but I'm still angry about this, especially when it comes to your kids. I mean, I got children. They're grown, but I can't tell you that, my ex-in-law, son-in-law is my favorite person, but I gotta let it go. I gotta let go. And so it's difficult. I think you really have to develop a prayer life. If you're really holding on to something that is just burning you up on the inside, you have to seek help. You have to talk about it, journal, write about it, receive the importance or begin to understand the importance of why you have to let it go for yourself. If you love yourself, again, forgiving is not saying that it didn't happen. It's not saying that it didn't affect you. It's dealing with it. It's moving past it. It's overcoming it. It's not hiding it. It's not erasing it. But I'm going to forget. I got to get through this thing. I can't let it stop me anymore.
Yeah, no, I think beautifully said. And the other one you talked about, I love the one you came where you talked about the bread. You put it in water and it expands. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I think there are two types of people. Generally, there are people who tend to be more takers, people that tend to be more givers. And sometimes when you're giving, you do it because you want to. But there are other times where you feel exhausted because, like you said, you can get taken advantage of. People don't appreciate it. And sometimes you're just like drained. Yeah. Do you suggest okay, just take a break for the day? Or are there any thoughts of, again, how do you give with still giving to yourself?
You have to know yourself. You have to use wisdom. You find someone's taking advantage of you or of your resource that can be better served with someone who's not going to take advantage of it. I mean, that's where wisdom comes into play. If you realize you're being none of this is asking you to allow yourself to be taken advantage of. Somebody will get over on you. Yeah, they'll get over on you. Somebody might not appreciate it, but really that's none of your business. Well, you gave them that money and you don't know what they did with it. It's none of my business. My blessing is not attached to what they did with anything I gave them. I felt in my heart, and I felt in that moment, and I heard something within inside me that told me to do. That's all I'm responsible for. So what they do, what they did with it, that's none of my business. That has everything to do with their future. Mine is secure. Blessings are always going to come my way because I'm listening to moments. And then I've had people walk up to me just the other day, and I felt bad because usually I'm really a giver. Somebody walked up to me in a convenience store. I said, Wawa again. I guess you could tell. Spend time. I'm homeless. Do you have any money? Can you feed me or something? And usually I am moved to do that. And for some reason at that moment, I didn't receive the message to do anything. And that was odd for me. And I went to told my wife, and my wife was like, well, you didn't feel moved. You didn't feel moved. And I said, okay. Because there are times, and there are other times where just unexpectedly I felt, so you have to listen to that. And it wasn't because they were homeless. It wasn't because the way they looked. It wasn't because I was worried about anything. Just at that moment, I didn't receive validation that I was supposed to do anything at that particular time. So again, you got to be in tune with who you are. You got to be in tune with what you believe in, and you got to use some wisdom. You can't allow, the law of reciprocity does not call for you allowing people to walk all over you. You may have some close family members or whatnot that you've lent them some things, it might be money or whatever, over and over again, and you just haven't seen a life change. You got to use wisdom. I've been investing in you, and there's been no change. Then I'm going to stop investing in you. You know, I'm gonna give you a great excuse to use. Right? You ready, Carrie?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Somebody asks you for something, and you really don't want to give it. You have to say, "Listen, I know you're struggling right now, but I don't want to block what God's trying to show you."
Oh, I like it. Because it's when you say that, because like you said, I love what you're talking about. Again, whether I say it as intuition, whether you're speaking of a higher power or whatever, but the feeling of, do I want to be doing this?
Yeah.
And sometimes when I'm curious, because I've had this where sometimes, you do something for someone and it's expected, right? And then the time you say, I don't want to today. And then there's kind of like, well, why not? Yeah. What's wrong with you? And then they're trying to make you feel guilty.
I don't want to block what God's trying to do in your life.
It's going to be my new line. Wait, when you say that to people, what do they say?
Nothing. And they will never ask you for anything again. I'm telling you, they'll stop asking you. And I mean, you've already invested in them 2 or 3 times, and there's been no change. This is where wisdom has to come in. And you have to say, I don't want to block what God's trying to do in your life. And they will stop asking you for anything.
That's my new line. I
like it. They can't get mad because this is what, I don't want to block what God's trying to do. There's some lesson that we're not learning here. It's because I keep helping you. So I don't want to.
Yeah. Well, I think it's good that you're talking about, that, okay, you should be giving, but also it should be because you want to, and you have this feeling, not because someone's forcing you or it's expected or a guilt, because then you actually feel worse after when someone's kind of forcing you to do it. You don't feel right about that either.
Sure, you gotta use wisdom. But you'll be surprised. Start answering like that, and they don't come around too much. Matter of fact, nobody asks me anymore. And I give, and also too, when you are giving, and you know it, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. If I give people money or whatever, I know I'll never see it again. Matter of fact, I relieve them of their burden. They'll say, I'm going to give it back to you next week. I said, don't give anything back to me next week. Keep it. And that's another thing that blows their mind. Like, oh my goodness. Let's not cause a rift between you and I by you thinking you owe me something. So just receive it as a gift.
Yeah. No, I'm using that new line. I love it. It's so good. So, and then the last one you had mentioned was about the habits. Is there any habit that you do that you has found has worked really well for you in kind of keeping this kind of positive mindset and just kind of awareness for yourself?
Yeah, I have a, and I just talked about this earlier today. I have a ritual at night, and I believe, this is probably crazy for me to say, but I believe that the most important time of the day is the 45 minutes right before you go to bed. Mm-hmm. And so I've gotten in the habit of, if I know I'm going to bed at 10 o'clock, that even if I have a show or something that's coming on at 9, from 9 to 10, DVR, whatever, I'll catch it tomorrow, catch it the next day, shoot, everything's a series. You can catch it on any streaming. But I begin a certain habit about 45 minutes. I ask myself certain questions to get myself in the mindset that when I do go to sleep, because you know what happens when you sleep, anything that's in your subconscious comes to conscious. I don't have a TV in my room. Me and my wife don't have a TV, nothing like that, and so I'll sit down for about 45 minutes and I'll ask my brain to do something for me while I sleep. I'll say this: show me where I could have been more loving today. Show me where I could have been more conscious in a situation. Show me where I could have been a better dad, a better husband, a better granddad. And so I start saying those things to and some people journal, but I say that to myself. And then, you'd be surprised the answers you get while you sleep, from your subject. Show me how my workout could have been more intensive, so I kind of just unwind and just kind of, and then I'll read a book, or of course I'll read a passage of scripture. I don't study anything, but just kind of prepare my mind to be thinking on these things while I sleep. And this catapults me into the next day. And this is a move that high achievers do. I say it's my high achiever move. I don't like waking up and not knowing what's happening, but these things they catapult me into the next morning. I know what I have to do anyway. I didn't time block the whole week, but now before I go to bed, I start asking myself these questions. And when I wake up, man, I'm focused. I'm ready to rock and roll. I don't watch the news at night. I don't fall asleep with the TV on. I don't want to hear about rapes and murders, and I don't want to sleep on that stuff.
Yes, I love that. I agree, because I've always been a person. I never understood people that watch these very intense, like graphic, horrific things on TV before they go to bed. I'm like, no. If I'm watching TV, it needs to be Friends. It needs to be something light, or like same thing. I do a lot of meditation, or just like you said. I love that you do that, because I think you're right. If you sleep well, your brain as well, then you can kind of start the next day. So it starts the night before, which is, it's a really good point. We only got through 3 of the 7. So if people want to learn more, where can they connect with you, or where can they get the book that talks about this?
My website is ralph@ralphgravesjr.com. It's simple as that. My book is there. The name of the book is called Unstoppable. There's other laws, the law of practice and law of expectancy. But you go to ralph@ralphgravesjr.com, grab the book Unstoppable. You can join and become part of my Unstoppable community. You can check out the Unstoppable podcast. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on every social media platform there is. And that's how you can drop me email there too, at ralph@ralphgravesjr.com. And, Ralph@ralphgravesjr, that's the email. And I'll make sure that we'll get back to you. We'll start a conversation and things like that. But that's where I am.
Perfect. And the last question I like to ask all of my guests, Ralph, is what is one word or quote or mantra that you try to live by every single day?
One quote or a mantra I try to live by every day. I say this, actually, I have about 3 mantras on my phone. My alarm goes off 3 different times during the day, and with my voice. And the beginning of one of them is, I choose not to be common.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah. I think that's every day around 3:30 or something like that. I choose not to be common.
What does that mean to you?
That means that, I was put on this planet, I believe, to do extraordinary things, just like this name of your podcast, and so it's up to us to find it. It's up to us to do the work. And so I don't want to be mediocre. I want to do beyond what's common. I don't want to do what people do just every day. I want to put in the extra work, the extra time. I choose to live a life of purpose. When I say at a different level, I'm not even talking monetary. I'm talking about purposeful life. To bless as many people as I can. And so I want to be a man who does uncommon things.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Ralph, for sharing your story and some tips and just your overall just energy. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to hearing more in the future.
Well, thank you for allowing me to be here. And I think what you have going on is wonderful, and I'm glad we linked up. And I got to have you on my podcast. Will
Anytime. We're Jersey friends. We're ready to go. So you let me know.
We're going to work that out, Ms. Carrie Roberts. Thank you.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much.